Welcome to the TheBrick.Church YouTube channel. My name's Taylor and I get the great privilege of being your student pastor here at The Brick. And right now is like the perfect moment for you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It gives you the ability to know everything that's happening at the TheBrick.Church, and our hope is our resource to you. It's an opportunity for you to get everything you need to walk out what God's called you to as a fully devoted follower of Christ. So without further ado, let's lean into the message and hear what God has for us.
All right, we're finishing this thing up. All right, this is the last week in our series, Character of a Dreamer. And what we've endeavored to do, our goal for this series is to awaken dreams that may have been dead, start brand new dreams that you never thought about, or put gasoline on the fire of the dreams of God in your life. So where we've come from is really following Joseph's story and talking about having the audacity to dream. Right? That's the key thing. You got to have the audacity to believe that God would use even you, that God would plant inside of you his dreams. It's a crazy thought. So if people think you're weird, it's okay, because it is kind of weird, right? We believe that the creator of the universe, the size of the universe is you can't even fathom how big it is. Every time I think about it, it's too much for me to conceive of. And yet he looks down on us, smaller comparatively than ants, and cares about us, thinks about us, cares about us, dreams about what we can do and who we can become. That takes audacity. That just takes an absurd amount of faith to believe that God would care about you like that. And he does. And we believe he does, and we live like he does because we know he's a good God. And then we talked about finding your dream, protecting your dream, and being faithful with your dream. What I want you to see today, our goal for today, is for you to see and trust God that he's not done. He's not done, right? You may get to a spot in your life where you're thinking, whew, we made it, right? Like, oh, got it. This is good. Okay, now I'm done. No, he never stops. He's a God who doesn't stop working. He's a God who's not done. Even when one dream is completed and you've attained the thing you've been dreaming about, he's still working some things in you and working in people around you, right? So today, if you get nothing else, I need you to know that God is not done working in you. He's not done working through you, and he's not done working in the people around you. If you stop your story too early, thinking you're done, there are going to be some other people miss out. Be other people in your story, other people in your life that are missing out because you stopped when you got comfortable. And so today I want to challenge you to let God keep working, that he's not going to finish. He's not done with you. I don't care your age. I don't care your story. He never stops working as long as we let him. All right. So what we're going to do is continue to catch up on Joseph's story. All right. To catch up with Joseph, which who we've been looking at because he's got the character of a dreamer. So to catch up with Joseph, where we left off is that Joseph started out as a brother of 12, right? He's one of the younger brothers of 12 brothers, had a dream that they would bow down before him. The brothers didn't like it, and they decided to kill him. And then one of the brothers, his name was Judah. Judah thought, you know what? Let's make some money off of this, right? Like, let's not kill him. Let's sell him into slavery. We can make a profit, right? Not great character, Judah. Good business idea though, right? Why just murder somebody when you can make money off of them? So they sell him into slavery. He ends up in Egypt in Potiphar's house, who's like a general in the Egyptian army. Really important. He raises up in the chain of command as a slave, and he rules the whole house. And then all of a sudden, Potiphar's wife notices Joseph is nobody else? Built different. Y'all remember? Nobody else remember that. Built different. Ladies, he was built different. Don't close your eyes. Don't think about it. He looked good, okay? He was looking great. She liked what she saw. She went after him. He had the character to say no, stiff arm, run. He left some of his clothes behind, bailed out the door half naked, right? He didn't care. It didn't matter. I'm not going to do it. He ends up in prison because of the false accusation. He raises up the ladder, helps other people with their dreams. Right? And then finally, after sitting another 2 years in prison, after helping other people, the dream comes to fruition. And it feels like Joseph thinks he's done, right? Joseph gets there. He tells them about 7 years of feast. It's going to be amazing. You're going to have all this food, but don't get ahead of yourself. You need to hold back some because you're about to have 7 years of famine. And that's where we're at. And Joseph gets to become second in command of all of Egypt. The greatest empire of its day, he's second in command. You would think he's done, and it seems like he thinks he's done. Because he gets into the 7 years of feast, and he has kids. And this is where we left off last week. He has kids, and he names one of the kids to suggest he thinks he's done. Here's what it is where we left off last week in Genesis 41, verse 51. It says, Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. I'm good. This thing, not forget their names, not forget where I came from, but like this thing isn't holding me back, right? This thing isn't holding me down. It's not weighing me down. I've been able to attain all the goodness of God, and he's redeemed my story, and I get to be in this position of the dream God has for me. I'm good, right? That's kind of what he's saying. What we're going to find out is that Joseph isn't really done. He's not really as good as he thinks he is. There's some things in the next part of his story as we wrap up his story that clearly indicate Joseph is not done. God is not done with Joseph, and Joseph isn't as good as he thinks he is. Have you ever met anybody that think that they're good, that say that they're good, but you know they're not good? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll give you some examples. Somebody's like, I've totally forgiven that person. Right? Like I'm totally over it. And then the next three sentences get a little bit louder. The color on their face starts to turn red. Their blood pressure raises up a little bit. You're like, have you forgiven them? No. Are you sure you're there? It's like, nah, maybe not. Like they'll tell you like, no, I'm actually really good with what happened. Right? Like I'm okay with the way that relationship ended. I'm fine. And then the next couple of sentences, you're like, you're not fine. Right? Like I'm really working on my finances. I am good. I'm starting on a right track to get out of debt. And then 2 minutes later, they're like, but treat yourself. I've had a hard day. I deserve this. Like click, 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 buy on Amazon, right? Like they say they're good. They sound like they're good, but they're not good. Let me ask you another question. This one you won't like as much. Have you ever been that person? You ever been that person? You say you're good. You keep saying you're good, but everybody around you knows you're not, right? One of the things about humanity that intrigues me the most is how often we lie to ourselves, how good we are at self-deception. We will lie to ourselves and be like we get past a lie detector test saying about ourselves, we're good, I'm fine, that doesn't bother me, I'm over it, it's no big deal. We get past the lie detector test when everybody else in our life knows we're lying. And we've set up boundaries where they can't really speak into it because we're keeping like, no, rejected, hand to the face. No, absolutely not. No, thank you. I'm not talking about that. I'm fine. Don't worry about that. I'm totally okay. This isn't a real addiction. It's not a real problem. I'm fine. I'm a functioning alcoholic. It's totally fine. Don't talk to me about that. I'm totally fine when everybody else around us can see it. And that's the part I want to see if you'll let God in on. Today, I want to see, as you see in Joseph's story, the clarity that gets brought up to Joseph. That if you have some things that God is trying to bring to your memory, trying to bring up to you, that you'll really let God work. That you'll let God in on the deepest, darkest parts of your soul. That you'll let him have everything. That you'll trust him to write your story, even if it gets difficult. Now, what I'm not saying is let's go dig up ghosts. We don't need to go looking through our past and digging up everything that ever took place, because honestly, like one of the key factors in major depression is ruminating. If you spend time thinking about pain over and over again, you're probably going to end up depressed. If all you think about is all the tragedies that have ever happened in the world, all the tragedies that have happened in your life, you're probably not going to be in a good headspace. So I'm not saying like, let's just go dig up everything that ever made us sad in life, but I am saying let's pay attention. When God repeatedly brings something to our mind, when God shows up in places that we weren't expecting him to get us to work through some stuff, to really address some things that are going on and let him in, let him have it. When you start to see a pattern, like, all right, I definitely need to deal with that. All right, God, I'm gonna do it. Okay, so we're gonna look at Joseph's story to do that. To kind of catch you up to Joseph's story, I want to kind of give you a visualization of his brothers. There's 12 of them, but we're not gonna do all the brothers because not all of them show up. There's only 5 of them that apparently matter. The other 7, who knows? Who cares, right? There's these other 7. I'm convinced, at least with Jacob, and maybe some of you have like 7, 8, 9 kids. I don't know how many kids y'all have. I'm convinced that once you start having that many kids, you're just playing the odds. Like you just don't, you're just gonna pick 2 or 3 that you bet on and the rest are just like, that kid does some stuff. He has a bed to sleep in and I feed him. I'm not sure of that, but I'm convinced a lot because that seems to be Jacob's story. But we're gonna look at these 5. These are the 5 essentials. I didn't draw these, all right. I did find them on like clip art and I thought they were fantastic and they would lock in to your memory. So here's the 5 we're gonna talk about when they come up. These are the sons of Jacob, also known as Israel. God changes his name, so he goes by both names, Jacob or Israel. These are his sons. This first one is the firstborn. He's the oldest. His name is Reuben. Not only is he a son of Jacob, but as you can tell, he played in a 70s rock band, for sure. Like, there's not a doubt in my mind that, like, he was rocking in the 70s. Simeon doesn't come up as much today, but I don't know what happened to Simeon. I don't know, man. I don't know why he shaved the mustache or if he was able to grow a mustache. I don't know what's going on with Simeon, but something's going on. Anyways, Judah, so he's like the second born. Judah's kind of in the middle of the pack. He's not in the third in the birth order. But Judah is the one we've already talked about a little bit more in depth. Judah is the one that had the great idea. Hey, I got an idea. Let's make some money off of this. Let's sell him to slavery. That's Judah, not a very good person, apparently. And then we got Joseph, who can't grow a beard or a mustache. And so in Egypt, it worked out perfectly for him. That's Joseph. We've heard about Joseph all throughout the series, so it should be fine. Lastly is Joseph's brother, Benjamin. Now, Benjamin is Joseph's full brother. Technically, by our standards, all of the other brothers are Joseph's half brothers. They all have the same dad, but they have different moms except for Benjamin. Benjamin and Joseph have the same mother, so they're full brothers. But as you can tell, Benjamin also played in a 70s band, but it was more like Bee Gees. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't like rock music. You can tell by the way I use my welcome. Okay. No time to talk. Use it high or use it low and kicked around since, you know, it's all right. Okay, no, I'll stop there. Trev still won't let me sing on stage for some reason, and it's a mystery as to why he won't let me do that. So these are the brothers. These are the brothers of Joseph. And these are kind of going to show up in today's story. And I need you to kind of be able to picture them. If they show up behind me, it's just to help you remember who's who as we tell this story. So let's catch up to where they're at. We're about to catch up to a spot where they're in the years of famine, right? There's a famine taking place, and all of Joseph's brothers and family are in Canaan, which is a really far distance away, and Joseph's in Egypt doing his thing. They don't know that Joseph's still alive. They think he's either dead or enslaved and don't know anything about him. Joseph's dad thinks he's dead. So they're in their land of Canaan, and the famine hits. The famine hits the whole world, and they're about to starve. So they realize, okay, we are about to starve, and Jacob, all of the sons' dad, Jacob, sends the boys. He's like, listen, go to Egypt. I heard that they've got food there because of what happened. They had a feast. They held some back. So then we've got food in Egypt. I need you to go buy some. He sends them with money. Go buy some, except I'm going to hold back Benjamin. Benjamin's going to stay with me because now when I lost Joseph, Benjamin becomes the new favorite. We have not said and will not say Jacob was a very good father. No one has argued that. I've not seen a theologian. Not the best dad, apparently, but Benjamin is now the favorite. So I've already lost Joseph, at least as far as Jacob is concerned. So I'm going to protect Benjamin. Everybody else goes. So the 10 brothers are sent to Egypt. They show up without Benjamin, and Joseph recognizes them because they have to go to the guy in charge of all the food. They show up to Joseph. Joseph recognizes his brothers, but his brothers don't. His brothers do not recognize Joseph. It might sound crazy, but it has been over 20 years since they've seen him. He was 17 when they sold him into slavery. They don't know where he went. They sold him to some Ishmaelites. They don't know he ends up in Egypt. They don't know which direction they were heading. 20 years later, they show up to a guy who could have been dressed in any sort of garb, right? All of the Egyptian history, when we go to tombs in Egypt, you see like ridiculous outfits. There's no telling what he's dressed like, what he's acting like. He's speaking the Egyptian language. So it really makes sense that they don't recognize him. But Joseph recognizes them. And Joseph decides to mess with them, right? Seems like a fair thing to do. Now, I'm not sure. I don't know what's fair to say about what Joseph's doing. I think there's a combination of things potentially where he's messing with them because he's still got some things he's saying he's okay with, but he's not okay with. Like he's messing with them. And I also think he's testing to find out where they're at. If they're good people now, if they've turned into bad people. I think there's some things God is working out in them through Joseph's test. So I don't think he has pure, perfect motives, but also God's using some of what's going on. So what he does, he's like, listen, you guys are spies. And he starts asking them all these questions about their family, and they tell him about their younger brother, Benjamin, who didn't get to come. And he's like, y'all are liars. He just flat out tells them, you're lying, and I don't trust you. You guys are trying to figure out if you can take over Egypt. He knows, Joseph knows they don't have an army big enough to come against Egypt, and yet he's messing with them. And so he's like, listen, here's how I'm gonna find out if you're telling me the truth. I'm gonna keep one of your brothers back. I'm gonna keep one of your brothers as prisoners, and the rest of you can go home. You bring me Benjamin, the son you told me about back, the brother you told me about back, you bring me him back, then I know you're not lying to me. And they're like, I mean, they don't have any control to fight against it. They're against the Egyptian army, so they don't really have a choice. They're devastated, and so he's going to hold Simeon back and send the rest home. And here's what happens as Joseph overhears their conversation. Let's take a look in Genesis chapter 42, verse 21 through 24. 21, they said to one another, surely we're being punished because of our brother, because we saw how distressed he was when he cried to us for mercy, but we refused to listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. Reuben said to them, didn't I say to you, don't sin against the boy, but you wouldn't listen. So now we must pay for shedding his blood. Now they did not know that Joseph could understand them, for he was speaking through an interpreter. He turned away from them and wept. When he turned around and spoke to them again, he had Simeon taken from them and tied up before their eyes. So here's the first moment. Joseph thinks he's in control. Joseph has named his son Manasseh. I'm good with my family. I forgot my father's house. It don't bother me no more. And the second he starts hearing them talk about the incident, he can't hold it. This is how you know there's still some things God is working out in you, right? This is how you know. It's like you think you're in control and all of a sudden you're just driving and grief hits. All of a sudden the day is normal and all of a sudden the addiction tries to sneak back up. All of a sudden everything's fine and your childhood trauma shows up in your face. All of a sudden everything's okay and your abuser is right in front of you when they shouldn't be there, right? Joseph has got to sit there and watch all of his brothers, but not just all of them. Reuben at least tried to help. He's got Judah in the room too. And I think he knows, it seems like he overheard Judah saying like, no, let's sell this guy into slavery. Not because he want to save his life, because he want to make money. He's got to face up to his abuser. He's not as good as he thinks he is because he's got to stop when he hears their interpretation of the story and turn around and cry, dab his eye, and come back. Here's what I want you to watch for. There's things that are going to come up, and they just come up, and you just deal with them. They're grief, you sad, you cry, you move on. And there are other things that are patterns that God is trying to work out in you, that God is not done with you. God is trying to work some things out. And this one moment would be fine, but God's not done with Joseph's story. God is still writing, and if he'll let him in, he's going to do some things in his life. So for you, look for the patterns. What are the patterns, right? The question today we're wrestling with is, will I let God write my story even when it gets hard? Even when I got to deal with some stuff that I don't want to admit to, even when I've got to deal with the tears that I wish I could push aside and ignore, will I really let him continue to write my story? Because I'm probably good, right? Some of you are in a spot where you're kind of good. You don't really have to deal with it, but what would you be missing out on if you ignore it? What are you missing out on the things if you don't really deal with the stuff God keeps bringing up? So for Joseph, we're seeing a pattern. It's not just one moment of sadness. There's a pattern of God trying to do work in his life, and Joseph's got to decide if I'll let him. Am I going to let him have all of it? So here, continue on with the story. Joseph sends them back. He keeps Simeon back, one of the brothers, Simeon. He keeps him back tied up as a slave, sends him back home, says, hey, if you want to come back and free your brother Simeon, you bring me Benjamin. But he's got another trick up his sleeve. He packs all their silver back into their bags. The silver they brought to pay for the food that they were going to have, he puts it back in their bag and doesn't tell them, sends them on. They get halfway gone, and one of them notices, oh no, our money's still here. They're going to think we stole it. They get all the way home. The rest of the brothers notice all the silver is in everybody's bag. This is not good. It's going to make it that much harder to go back with Benjamin and prove that we're not spies, not thieves. So they go back home. They tell their dad, Jacob, hey, here's what happened. And the dad's like, come on, man. Why'd you even tell him about Benjamin? That's his distress. Not like, oh no, Simeon, my son, let's figure out how to get him. Let's go save him. No. Why would you tell them about my son Benjamin? Why would you do that? Why would you risk Benjamin? And Judah and Jacob is out. Like, Jacob's not going to deal with it. I'm not going to do it. We're not going to do this. And then they kind of are like stuck, right? Because there's still a famine and they're still starving. So they go through the food. They stay there long enough to go through the food and go back to famine spot again. Like, we're still hungry. What do we do now? The brothers go to their dad again. Like, listen, we're starving. This isn't going to work. We've got to go back to Egypt. The only way to do it is with Benjamin. He's not even going to listen to us. He might put us all in prison if we go back without Benjamin. The dad's like, absolutely not. I've already lost Simeon. Well, no, you haven't yet, but you counted him off because you don't want to risk Benjamin. I've already lost Joseph. He doesn't know that Joseph's still alive. I'm not losing Benjamin too. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to risk it. Not going to happen. Not going to do it. And then Judah, the brother who really was the bad guy, the brother who made the decision to sell him to slavery, make a profit. It's like, listen, Dad, you can hold me to account. We're going to die anyways. We've got to do something. You can put his blood on my hands. Like if I don't bring him back, then for the rest of my life, you can hold me physically accountable for what happened to Benjamin. I will do everything in my power to protect him, and anything that ever happens to him on the way or on the way back is on my head, right? You see Judah starting to shift. In the middle of the story, you see Judah starting to shift. God is writing Joseph's story and also writing other people's story in the midst, because Joseph is submitting his story to them, and God is going to continue to work some things. So they come back. They show up. And they bring Benjamin. Jacob finally gives in. All right, okay, cool. Y'all go back. We're going to die anyways. What choice do we have? You guys go back and solve this thing. And here is Joseph's response when he sees his younger brother. Verse 29 of Genesis chapter 43. It says, when Joseph looked up and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, he said, is this your youngest brother whom you told me about? Then he said, may God be gracious to you, my son. Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome by affection for his brother and was at the point of tears. So he went to his room and wept there. Okay, first time, it's just a dab. I turn, I wipe my eyes, and I come back and I'm okay. The second time, he's got to leave the room. Right? We're starting to notice a pattern where God is not going to leave Joseph alone. God is not just going to let Joseph go the rest of his life upset about this thing, pretending he's fine when he's absolutely not fine. When God keeps bringing stuff up to you, pay attention. When it keeps showing up at your door, when it keeps bringing emotion up in you, when you keep having to deal with stuff you thought were dead and buried, pay attention. God is working, because he will not leave you alone. He will not stop working on you. The character of God, the character that God is trying to instill in you, the character of a dreamer, is him dreaming about you having character. So if there's some things in your life he's working out, pay attention. You can trust him with your story. It's not just about your story, it's also about other people's story as well. Trust God with the writing of your story, even when it's the darkest, deepest parts of your soul that you want to avoid, you want to ignore. Trust God. So they have a feast. Joseph's there, they're all there. He actually feeds his brother 5 times as much as everybody else. So they all know, like, hey, this guy also favorites Benjamin as well as our dad. This is great. He gets 5 times as much as everybody else at the feast. There's a famine going on, so that's saying something. So he gives them a bunch of food. They have this feast. It's amazing, and they think they're good. He gives them Simeon back. They take Benjamin back. They all start heading home. But Joseph's got another trick up his sleeve. He takes his really fine cup, really fine chalice. He puts it in Benjamin's bag, but doesn't tell anybody, and sends them on their way. Halfway there, he sends his soldiers, go hunt them down. One of them stole my cup. He gets there, the soldiers get there, and like, one of you has stolen the cup from Joseph. It's a very important cup. It's a very pricey cup. We know you stole it. Give it back. They're like, we don't have a cup. I don't know what you're talking about. And here's where the ignorance of his brothers shows through. They decide to place a wager. No one asked them to place a wager. They decide, apparently, as terrible gamblers, to put a wager forth that made no sense. They're like, listen, if any one of us has his cup, then you can make us all your slaves. Why? Why would you say that, right? Like, why would you offer that? Why would take that risk? Why would anybody take that risk? But they do. And so they bring them all back home. They look in Benjamin's bag, find out it's in Benjamin's bag. Everybody's coming back. And they're like, hey, I guess we're all your slaves. And Joseph's like, you know what? No, I don't need all of you. I'll just take Benjamin. The rest of you guys can go. He's now my slave. That's the moment. And finally, in that moment, Judah stands up, says, listen, don't. Take me instead. And this is the moment where Joseph breaks, where it's like full, like it's time. It is time to come to like a different moment, restoration. It's time to get healed completely. I said I was healed, but I wasn't all the way there yet. It was time to really let some things out that I've been holding in. Here's Joseph's response when Judah tries to make the deal with him. Verse 1 and 2 of Genesis 45. It says, Joseph was no longer able to control himself before all of his attendants. So he cried out, make everyone go out from my presence. No one remained with Joseph when he had made himself known to his brothers. He wept loudly. The Egyptians heard it, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. This was his response. This is a moment where it finally comes out, where he's restored back to his brothers, where he can admit who he is and begin the forgiveness process as a whole and deal with his brothers and have his family back and have full restoration with his family, save his family, know his family. The thing he thought he was over, he wasn't over. God still had a work to do in him. And here's the deal. If you're taking notes, many of us think God just wants to redeem something and get us good. But God is really trying to go to greatness. Like, God is not just settling for one way. God, if you're taking notes, God doesn't settle for just redemption, but full restoration. whatever that looks like, if you hand him the pen of your story, if you hand him every part of your heart and say, God, have me. When it comes to the place where I need to weep, I'll weep. When it comes to the place where I celebrate, I'll celebrate. I'll let you write the story when it's hard and when it's easy. I'll let you write my story, and I'll let, when you bring stuff up to my attention, there's a pattern here, pattern of 3, I'll give you the pen and you write my story. My control issues don't get to write the story. My childhood trauma don't get to write the story. My past doesn't write my story. What society says about me doesn't get to write my story. God, you have my story. And if you do that, if you say, all right, God, have all of me, he will not only work in you, but work around you. There'll be people that are different because he's writing your story. The thing is, when he gets restored, everybody knows about it, right? Before, no one knew that Joseph was like lying, right? Maybe Joseph was great at deceiving everybody and thought he was fine about his childhood, but it's clear that everybody knew about the restoration. Everybody knew what was taking place. See, if you'll give God your heart, you give God the dark places, and you say, all right, God, you have every part of it, the world will see God work in you. Everybody will hear about your restoration. Everybody will hear about it because it's not impressive when Joseph is just a good dude doing good things. It is impressive when people who have handed God things and trusted God with their life have a story that gets rewritten to full restoration. Joseph's story to be the second in command is amazing. It is God amazing when Joseph shows up and is able to forgive his brothers, love his brothers, and have his family back. That's when you can tell it's like, oh, no, there's no doubt. It wasn't just that Joseph was good. It was that God was good. And for many of you, that's the part you're going to jump ship on. You're going to get to the hard spot, and God's going to bring pattern after pattern after pattern to tell you, deal with it. I'm not settling just for redemption. I'm not settling just for average. I'm not settling just for okay. I need you fully restored. And you're going to say, no, I'm good enough. No, I'm functioning as an alcoholic. I'm doing okay. We're in debt, but like, it's fine. It's fine. We'll just keep going to debt. It's not that big of a deal. No, my marriage is average. We'll just settle there. That's fine. We're not about to get a divorce, so that's better than most people. We'll just settle in at like, I'm not really healthy, but like, I'm healthy enough. I'm not dying tomorrow, so it's just gonna be fine. I'm not gonna go to the doctor and get a diagnosis and get really healthy. You'll just settle for that spot. And if you'll let God, he's like, no, we don't settle. God doesn't stop working. He's still doing some things in you, and he's still doing some things in the people around you. And the question is, will you let him write? Will you let him write? Because it might mean it breaks you. Like the thing I'm asking you to do means you have got to care more about God's dream for your life and God's opinion of you, God's plans for you, than you care about man's opinion. Joseph is willing to weep to where the whole house can hear him. That's the breaking point he's at. For some of us, that's where we stop. Some of you, and maybe it's more men than women, but this is true for everybody. For some of you, you have moments of worship, even today, where God was doing some stuff in you, and then you started to be like, ooh, I'm not gonna cry right in front of everybody. I'm not really gonna break right now. Like, there's too many people around. Well, I gotta get to work. I can't really break down on the way there. I've really gotta deal with this thing. And there's so many areas of your life where man's opinion wins over God's opinion. You care more about people's perception of you than really letting God do a work in your life. And you have to choose. Scripture tells us we can't serve two masters. Most of the time it's talking about money and serving God. But for our society, the majority of the time it's man's opinion or God's opinion. You got to decide which master you serve. And it may mean just from a broad, not just your emotions, but every area of your life. Do you care more about what you look like on Instagram and Facebook, or do you care more about what your character looks like on the inside to God? Will I really sacrifice whatever it takes? And I don't care what anybody thinks about. I'll sell my car. I'll sell my house. I'll do whatever it takes to get out of debt, no matter what anybody else thinks about me, because Scripture calls it slavery to be in debt. And I don't want to be in slavery when God has called me to be free. So will I do what it takes, or do I care too much? Oh, I can't downsize houses. I got a certain perception to keep up. I can't change what I wear. I got to buy the nicest stuff. Will you sacrifice man's opinion for God's opinion? Will you decide which master you serve? Because some of us get to a spot in Jesus and we're good enough, and God is like, I'm not. But the thing is he's not going to force the pen out of your hand, right? He loves you enough as his kid that he'll take everything that you'll give him. But if you stop, he's not going to force you. He'll keep bringing it up. He'll keep trying, but you eventually got to hand him the pen and go, I like your story better than mine. Even if it hurts. Even if some of the character development isn't the way I want it to be, I like your story better than mine. That we would break enough to let him dream of character for us, right? We dream to have the things God has for us. God dreams for us to have his character. And he will never stop working, whether you're young or whether you're in the nursing home, whether your health is deteriorating, whether you're stuck in the hospital. God is not done. He does not stop. Not in you, not through you, and not for the people around you. But you got to let him. Here's the thing that's crazy about this story. See, Joseph gets this redemption and restoration. It's this beautiful moment of where God is like really finishing Joseph's story. And Joseph finishes really well. I mean, he gets all of his family back in Egypt. He gets to see his dad again. He gets to continue in this role, and his family's taken care of. He's like, I got y'all land that y'all can be herding sheep and goats like you always do in this spot of Egypt. It's going to be perfect. His story ends beautifully because he's faithful to let God write the story, faithful to the patterns of seeing his brother and giving God his heart and being willing to weep in front of Pharaoh, in front of his whole household, in front of everybody around him. He's willing to break and let God have it. But see, his restoration isn't just about him. See, there's another story taking place of redemption, and that's Judah's story. In the middle of Joseph's story is Judah's story. We skipped over chapter 38 because it's just so random. You're hitting chapter 37, we start talking about Joseph and him getting sold into slavery, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it starts talking about Judah. Judah moves away from his family after selling his brother into slavery with his other brothers. He moves away, and he has this whole story where God is revealing to him that he has not got as much character as he thinks he is. God essentially helps him see his flaws. He has this whole story, and then we move right back into Joseph's story. It seems like this story is about Joseph. And some of us are having trouble with this series because we don't connect to Joseph, because we realize we're not as good as Joseph, and we could never be as good as Joseph. And what I'm here to tell you is the redemption and the restoration of God isn't limited to those who are as good as Joseph, because Judah gets redeemed too. Judah gets the redemption story as well. So most of us are more like Judah than Joseph. Most of us realize our past, our character, the way we've hurt people, the way we've been selfish. Maybe, hopefully none of you sold your siblings into slavery, but you know you've done some stuff to hurt people. You know you've taken more than was yours. You know that you've taken more from people emotionally and physically from people that wasn't yours to have. You decided to get yours while you could, and you hurt the people around you in the process, and still God is writing your redemption story. Joseph has his story written, and it's almost like Judah's story is just as important, if not more. So Judah has that moment, right? He has the deal with his dad that we talked about. He sold his brother, has this character moment, starting to get better, has the deal with his dad. Listen, you can hold his blood on my hands. If anything ever happens to him, it's on me. And then when he goes to Joseph, you can see Judah's heart is restored. Judah's heart is in the right spot finally. As bad as he was before, Judah gets redemption. Right before Joseph breaks, right before Joseph weeps, he makes a deal with Joseph to say, listen, man, take me, not my brother. I can't watch it. Here's what he says in Genesis chapter 44, verse 33 and 34. So now, please let your servant remain as my Lord's slave instead of the boy. As for the boy, let him go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I couldn't bear to see my father's pain. He didn't care before. He was willing to sell his brother and move on like life, like it was fine. It's totally okay. I sold my brother and didn't deal with it. But now he remembers back to his father's pain when Joseph was sold. And he's like, I can never go back there. Who I am is not who I was. I can't. I would rather give my life as a slave to you than ever have to look my dad in the face and tell him he lost another son. I can't do it. I won't do it. Judah's redemption story is happening in the midst of Joseph's story. I'm gonna make a crazy statement. I would actually argue that this whole story is more about Judah than it is about Joseph. What do I mean by that? Well, if I were writing the story of Jesus and what Jesus is doing in humanity, and like all of the Old Testament is leading up to the bloodline of Jesus and what Jesus is going to do, and like just leading up to this restoration of God's chosen people, leading to this, the salvation of the world in Jesus. And if I were writing Jesus' story and I wanted to put it in someone's bloodline, I would absolutely put it in Joseph's. Of course, the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of Jesus should be Joseph. That's the bloodline. That's the one that should work. That's the one the story seems to be about. But Joseph is not in his story. Joseph is a great-great-great-great uncle. Joseph is just an uncle of Jesus. You know who the great-great-great-great-grandfather is? Great times how many ever? It's Judah. Judah's redemption story. Not the one who had the best character, not the one that had it all together, not the one that had the most gifts and talents. It was the one who was most redeemed. The one who could admit and break to the spot. Here's the beauty. What my God does is he takes, it tells us in 1 Corinthians, he tells us that he takes the things that are foolish to confound the wise. He takes the worst of the worst and leverages that for his glory so that people can be clear. It wasn't about Joseph's character that led to Jesus. It was about God's redemption that leads to Jesus. And I did it through Judah to prove to the world that it is not about how amazing you are. It's about how much you trust me with your story, even in the worst of times. So if you're like me and you connect more with Judah than you do Joseph, don't worry. The bloodline of Jesus works in you too. The bloodline of restoration, the bloodline of redemption is found in Jesus himself, not found in how much character, how much development, how great you are, what family you came from. It is found in trusting him to write your story. And for some of you, the worst parts of your life are going to be the greatest parts of your story one day. Because they're going to be the things that God uses to prove his glory. They're going to look back and go, well, I know that person couldn't fix it on their own. I know that person couldn't have solved it. That person had nothing in their heritage to suggest they should have an amazing marriage. That person had nothing in their bloodline to suggest that their kids should be amazing. That person had nothing to suggest they should get over their anger issues, that they should get out of debt and be healthy financially. They have nothing in their line like, oh, that must have been Jesus. Oh, that was somebody who let Jesus write the story. Because if God can use Judah, if Judah is the one he picks to write the story of Jesus, you can be the story. You can be the one God picks to write his story about Jesus in you and Jesus through you, but you've got to let him have the pen. You've got to let him write your story. This whole gospel thing is finding out that we wrote our story on our own and it was awful. We wrote our story and it was bad and it was hateful and it was mean. And we came to him and go, I trust you more. That's what it means to follow Jesus. You write my story. I'm not good at it. And today, I hope and pray that you won't settle for just redemption in the dreams of God, but full restoration, that you trust that he's not stopping. He won't stop. He's going to continue to work in you, and he's going to work through you and around you if you'll let him write the story. Let's pray.
We are so excited that you're here today. If you heard that message and you feel like God's calling you to take the next step of trusting your life to him, then what we would love for you to do is text the phrase, I have decided. And what it does, it lets us know we can reach out to you so that we can help you understand that this is not a life you've been called to walk alone, but there's a community here at TheBrick.Church that wants to walk alongside you as you become everything that God has called you to be. And again, we want to say thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. It's allowing us to take this message so much more than just four walls, but to the world. And if you're really passionate about being a part of that and you want to give to us financially to partner with what God's doing at TheBrick.Church, then what you can do is you can text the phone number on the screen. And that's going to link you to a credit card, a debit card, or a bank account, but however you give. As a church, we say thank you so much. There are lives all over the world that are different because of what you are a part of here today. And we love you so much. We hope you have a beautiful week, and we can't wait to see you next time.